this particular element of the weather or the particular element of the atmosphere is most important in terms of distribution of the energy all over the world globally, and also its influence on the other parameters of the weather. So basically wind is defined as the air that is moving horizontally on the surface, we call it as a wind. And certain times air also moves vertically and we call them as the air currents. Coming to that of the wind, so winds can be categorized based on the quantum or the scale of its travel. So winds can be conveniently classified as primary winds, they can be classified as secondary winds and tertiary winds. The primary winds can also be called as a planetary winds or prevailing winds. So these planetary or prevailing winds move continuously over the entire planet. So these are the large scale winds, and these large scale winds are ensuring the distribution of the energy or the resources from one locality to the other locality in terms of the elements of the atmosphere. So the distribution of the carbon dioxide, the distribution of the nitrous oxide, whatever even the pollutants, how they are globally being ensured by that of the planetary winds. So these are the primary type of winds we have got, and similarly we have got other type of winds which are seasonal in nature. So these winds are also called as secondary winds. So these occur over a season, they last for 3 to 4 months. So this type of winds. There are certain type of winds which are existing locally, and certain people classify them as tertiary winds. For example, the beautiful phenomenon of land breeze and sea breeze, mountain winds and land valley breezes, these we call it as a local type of winds. And in addition to this, there are also certain types of winds which exist. So based on the occurrence of the local phenomena such as cyclones, etc. So that we call it as a seasonal winds. We classify them under seasonal winds. Hurricanes, typhoons, these are being called by different names all over the globe. Basically winds are being named based on the direction from which they blow, they come. So for example, if the wind is blowing from northern direction, we call it northern winds. If they blow from southern direction, we call southern winds. And why these winds are existing on the globe? This is one important phenomenon to be understood by anyone. So all over the globe solar radiation is being received, and this solar radiation, the quantity that is being received is not uniform in nature. Most of the radiation is being concentrated towards the tropics, and when we consider the globe into account, so when we consider this globe into account, we have got a equator which is of 0 degree latitude. So we call these are the lines connecting horizontal are called as latitudes, and these we have got the latitude of 30 degrees for convenience and 60 degrees because there is a certain significance is there. So the significance of 30 degrees is there is a concentration of high pressure area here, and 60 degrees we have got a low pressure area, and similarly this is the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, this way it occurs. And the quantity of the radiation that is being received on the globe is more in between these two horizons adjoining to tropics. All of us know that we have got very specifically certain dates are there, equinoxes we call that. That is on March 21st of every year and September 21st of every year. The sun is, the earth is located equally in terms of its exactly to the equator. So that day we call equinox, and the places at equator receives 12 hours of light and 12 hours of daytime. And on June 21st, so the earth will be inclined in such a way that more amount of solar radiation is being received to the northern hemisphere from March 21st to June 21st, and this extreme date of maximum amount of receptivity of the solar radiation is on June 21st, we call it as summer solstice. And similarly we have got the other date on December 21st where maximum amount of solar radiation is being received in the southernmost part. Here southernmost part is to the latitude of maximum of 22.5 degrees, either to the extremes. So one thing we should remember that, so in fact the earth on its revolution is making an inclination of 22.5 degrees to the north and south. So almost a 6 months period of time the earth is exposed most to its northern hemisphere, and the other 6 months period of time it is exposed to that of the southern hemisphere. And this way the quantity of the radiation that is being received is not uniform globally, and once the quantity of the energy or the radiation is not uniform in nature, so naturally the other consequences of that. So more the radiation, more the expansion of the air. Once air get expanded, lower is the quantity of the pressure that is being, atmospheric pressure will be lower in nature. So in order to compensate the atmospheric pressure, winds blow from higher pressure area to that of the low pressure area. So that way the prevailing winds are existing all over the globe. And similarly, the other, when you come to that of the polar regions, either North Pole or Southern Pole, the quantity of the radiation is low throughout the year. So because the angle of incidence of the solar radiation is at it has been made at an angle, whereas at equator it will be almost at perpendicular in nature. And the other most important thing is, which is also leading to that of the local winds is, so earth is rotating, it makes a one rotation in every 24 hours. So 12 hours of period of time, certain part of the earth, half part of the earth receives solar radiation, and the 12 hours and the counterpart of it will be in the darkness, and vice versa it occurs. So the quantity of the energy is not uniform, and this phenomenon is leading to that of the development of the low pressure areas all over the globe. In addition, in modern period or modern civilized period all over the globe, certain local factors, for example, it has become very common that, so we have recently seen that there is a burning of the forest in Amazon forest in United States, so American subcontinent. There we have noticed that, so naturally burning of the forest leads to low pressure, so winds start to move from adjoining areas. Likewise, local pressures will be developed. So these are certain movements, reasons for the movement of the winds. And coming to the categories of the winds, so as already discussed, the winds can be conveniently classified as a primary winds or prevailing winds. So these are also called as planetary winds, we call it as a planetary winds. So what is happening is, so when you come to that of the planetary winds, so these winds will be moving globally throughout the year. This we call it as a planetary winds. So earth makes rotation from west to east, this is all we know that, and we can see that only due to the reason of rotation of the earth from west to east, we are seeing the sunrise on the eastern part of the globe. Eastern part of the globe we will be seeing the sunlight. So what is happening is, so since this part receives higher amount of solar radiation, so naturally the air gets heated up, so winds start to move from the portions of the high pressure belt, the portions of high pressure belt to the portions of low pressure belt of the equator. So these type of winds are called as trade winds, we conventionally call as trade winds. So similarly, so since this latitude is called as horse latitude, we call it as a horse latitude. Similarly, certain parts of the winds also move to that of the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, like that likewise. So because a low pressure has been created here, and this we call it as a anti-trade winds. So these trade winds are also called as easterlies. The term easterlies has been added, easterlies, only due to the reason that the direction of the wind. So it is not actually perpendicular. These winds are supposed to be perpendicular in nature, because this part has been heated up, whereas this part is at a higher pressure. Virtually it should be perpendicular in nature. But one thing that is happening is, earth is spinning at the rate of, so it makes one spin of one rotation for 24 hours. So imagine a ball, so the earth. So here the circumference of the earth is much wider in nature, the circumference of the earth when we compare to that of the polar regions, and it is estimated that it makes a distance of travel of 12,000 kilometers approximately per hour. That is the speed of the travel of the earth at the equatorial part. When we compare with that of the parts of the polar region, which are not more than 5 kilometers per hour, the exact when you go to the close to that of the poles. So there is a great difference of the displacement of the travel or velocity, we call it as the velocity of travel of the earth. So we should take into consideration the entire atmosphere of its rotation on the globe. So this has led to the phenomenon of one important concept which you might have known is Coriolis force. Coriolis force. So for that we will be telling that, so when the winds start moving from that locality to this locality, the distance of the travel of this locale, this point will not be exactly here. Once if the winds start to move from this horse latitude to this locality, the distance of travel will be more here when you compare to this. So, these winds looks to be moving towards in the eastern direction or drifted to the east. We call that as winds are being drifted, or we can also consider the theory of relativity. So, by considering the theory of relativity, these winds will be looking to be blowing from the eastern. So, we call it as a easterly winds. So, similarly, the winds that are moving from the southern hemisphere will be also coming from the eastern part of the globe. We call as the tropical easterlies. Tropical easterlies or trade winds. These are the different names. Similarly, when we come to the other type of winds that are blowing from 30 degrees to that of the subpolar region of 60, this we call it as a subpolar region of 60 degrees. The winds also looks to be drifted towards that of the east. So, this we call it as a westerly. So, because for this the winds are blowing from the western direction. For the person who is standing at horse latitude, the winds start to be looks to be coming from the western direction. We call it as a westerly winds. So, similarly, these are also called as anti-trade winds. And when we come to that of the other winds that are blowing from that of the polar region to that of the horse latitude, the subpolar region which is at a lower pressure, the winds will be coming in from eastern direction. These are also called as polar easterlies. So, these are the different types of wind. The same phenomena of winds exist in the southern part of the globe also. The same phenomena of winds also exist. So, here we call it as a tropical easterlies, and we have got a westerlies which will be blowing in the form of west direction, and we have got a again easterly which will be coming. So, this particular aspect of Coriolis force is more important to be understood. Very simple concept actually. When we take any sphere into consideration, the central part will be rotating at a, even though when we consider that the quantity of the rotation is same, but the displacement that has been made by the central part will be much wider. So, when we apply the concepts of the trigonometry, so the quantity of the displacement will be more in nature. So, if suppose a person standing at the polar region throws a ball to the tropical region, so before it reaches to the exact point, the earth might have passed that location. So, naturally it looks to be coming from the eastern direction. So, virtually you can remember that all the winds that are blowing in the northern hemisphere are directed towards the clockwise direction or directed towards the right hand side. We call that right hand side. We call the right side. The winds will be moving in the right hand side direction. We will be telling. That is, if a person standing at the equator, and if you see any wind, it will be coming only from the right hand side, either going or coming. It will be only in the right hand side. And vice versa to the person when we look to that other southern hemisphere, and this phenomenon is due to the reason of the Coriolis effect. There is nothing to confuse here, Coriolis effect. So, these are the different types of planetary winds that are occurring. So, we have got a tropical easterlies, and these are the westerlies and polar easterlies. Similarly, we have got a winds which are blowing seasonally in nature, or these are also called as periodic winds. So, the seasonal winds are also called as periodic winds. We call the second category seasonal or periodic winds. Periodic means they occur for a small period of time, 3 to 4 months. And India and many countries are being blessed by these periodic winds, and India is the country which is benefited a lot by these periodic winds. Under this category we have got a monsoon type of winds. So, what is happening is, so we have already discussed that the earth will be inclined in such a fashion that from March 21st onwards, the entire northern hemispheres of the globe. So, for India, the entire large landmass of India, of North India, and also China, the entire Asian continent gets heated up. So, what is happening is a low pressure is being created after March 21st, and the maximum amount of low pressure should get created at June 21st. So, virtually winds start moving from southern hemisphere. From that of the southern hemisphere to that of the landmass, southern hemisphere. So, we have already discussed that the winds will be directed in the northern hemisphere only to the right hand parts, only due to the reason of Coriolis force. This is absolutely true, and it will be existing continuously, the Coriolis, because along a earth rotates, the Coriolis force exists. So since the winds are coming from the southern and western part, so from the month of June, so we call it as southwest monsoons, southwest monsoons. So after September 21st, what is happening is, it is the day of equinox, September 21st. The earth is inclined such a fashion that the southern part of the globe gets heated up, mainly of Indian Ocean, for when you consider the India into consideration. So this entire ocean gets heated up, so after September 21st, and since there is a more amount of vacuum or low pressure has been created on the Indian Ocean, winds start moving from that of the northern hemisphere. So since they are coming from the northern direction, northeast direction, we call it as a northeast monsoons. So northeast monsoon winds to India start from October 1st onwards. So the period from June 1st to that of the September 31st, we call it as a southwest monsoons. And since the winds are of large scale in nature, when you compare that of the area, so there will be lagging period of around 25 to 30 days in nature, So after September 21st, technically the radiations will be received only mainly on the southern part, or the earth will be making an inclination to expose its part of southern hemisphere rather than northern hemisphere, but still winds will be moving to a certain extent. So we call this portion, so there will be always a section that is a convergent section. So that we can understand better when we understand the concept of intertropical convergent zone. This, the region of equator, we call it as a intertropical convergent zone, because the winds from that of the southern hemisphere, winds from the northern hemisphere start to meet at the equator. So intertropical convergent zone. So once, the zone is supposed to be at 0 degrees, but the entire zone itself will be moving to around 3 to 4 degrees to the north and south of the equator. So based on the solar radiation. So for example, so this we can understand very clearly when we understand the monsoon phenomena of the Indian country itself. So on September 21st, so since the exposures are towards that of the southern hemisphere, but still the rainfall will be there in the Indian subcontinent in nature, but the rainfalls are confined to that of the latitudes close to the equator, and definitely there will not be rainfall in northern India. So after September 21st, and southernmost parts of the country receives the rainfall. This is because, so the winds that are moving by southwest are being forced or being convergent by that of the winds that are also blowing from that of the northern part. So there should be a certain way in which the winds can be blocked. So that way the entire rainfall or the monsoons will be shifting from locality to the locality. So this virtually we can see that most of the rainfalls of the country will be received in the month of June in the northern India, or even China, etc. In the month of July, August when you come, so the rainfall quantity, intensity of the rainfall will be gradually shifting from northernmost part of the hemisphere to that of the equator, and this continues until the September 21st or October 15th. That is, there will be shift in the movement. So already we will be telling that the rainfalls will be falling in terms of this. They are not continuous in nature, they are also making a periodic movement. So there will be shift in that of the quantity of the rainfall that is falling from that of the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and these all are being dictated by that of the phenomenon of the exposure of the earth to that of the solar radiation. So in fact we already discussed that solar radiation is one of the most powerful energy that is dictating, and it is also dictating the movement of the winds. So monsoon winds are also called as periodic winds, and these periodic winds are existing due to the reason of the distribution of the solar radiation. Similarly, we have got the third category of the winds that are called as tertiary winds or local winds in nature. We have got the concept of the local winds can be very clearly seen in the case of land breeze and sea breeze. So what is happening is, so when we come to that other phenomena of land and sea breeze in nature, the specific heat of land surface is much smaller than that of a water. So in order to increase the temperature of the water, so we need to add 1 calorie of the energy, whereas for land 0.3 calories of the energy is sufficient to increase the temperature of the land mass by 1 degree. So virtually what is happening during daytime is the land gets heated up very quickly for the same quantity of the radiation that has been received on the land surface and adjoining sea surface. Land gets heated up very quickly and virtually the air becomes lighter in nature. So winds start to move from a heavier place of the sea to that onto the land. So we get the sea breeze during daytime. So what is happening during night time is, so since the radiations are being given up by the earth very quickly during the evening times, so earth starts cool down by 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. whereas the sea surface gets heated up or the water bodies get heated up to the evening time, and the air on the water surface is lighter in nature. So winds start moving from land surface onto the sea during night time. So this we call it as a land breeze. So the winds are being nomenclated based on the direction from which they blow. So since the winds are moving during night time from land to that of the sea mass, we call it as a land breeze. So land breeze will be occurring during night time, sea breeze will be occurring during daytime. This way you should remember. And similarly we have got most important phenomena of mountain breeze and also valley breezes. So when we see any mountain and valley, this portion we call it as a mountain and this portion we call it a valley portion. So these areas of mountains gets exposed to the solar radiation during daytime. So virtually air starts to move from lower areas to that of the mountain. So since the winds are coming from the valley portion, we call it as a valley breeze. So valley breeze should occur during daytime. So the vice versa occur during the night time. So this gets cooled down and naturally the air will be more in nature as the heavier air has been already passed and the atmospheric pressure is lower in nature. Winds start to move from mountain parts to that of the valley portion during night time. So we have got the other important type of periodic winds that are called as cyclones and also anticyclones. So this is very most important, and these cyclones and anticyclones are also being called out by different names all over the globe. So basically cyclone is one wherein the low pressure exists at the center and high pressure is in the surrounding area. So the air from the surrounding area moves to the center in order to compensate the low pressure. So what is virtually happening is when the low pressure is existing in the central part and air starts to move from that of the other areas to compensate this low pressure area. So when this phenomenon occurs in the northern hemisphere, as already discussed, since the winds will be deflected towards the right, this particular winds looks to be deflected towards the right. So it looks to be moving in the form of an anticyclone. You see the phenomenon, how the winds are moving. So it looks to be moving in the form of an anticyclone. So in the case of cyclone in the northern hemisphere, the winds will be moving in the anti-clockwise fashion. So similarly, when this phenomenon of low pressure exists in the southern hemisphere, so the vice versa happens. In the case of the southern hemisphere, the winds are being deflected in the clockwise direction. So for the same cyclone, if it exists in the southern hemisphere, the winds are being deflected in the southern hemisphere. So actually I should write this arrow in this fashion. So because the air is moving towards the center. So for the case of the anticyclones, it is a vice versa. An anticyclone is one wherein high pressure is at the center and low pressure is in the surrounding areas. So vice versa happens that the wind will be moving. So you imagine for a cyclone in the northern hemisphere, the air will be moving air will be moving in the circular fashion in order to compensate this low pressure area. So for an anticyclone, high pressure is at the center, the air will be moving to the adjoining areas. So whatever the air that is moving to the adjoining areas, these are being deflected to that of the right. So since the air is coming from central part to the surrounding areas and they are being deflected, it looks to be moving in a clockwise direction in the case of a northern hemisphere. So for an anticyclone, the air will be moving in a clockwise from the northern hemisphere. For a cyclone, the air will be moving in a anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere and vice versa for southern hemisphere. So these are the important wind movements that are occurring in this globe. These cyclones are also being called by different names such as hurricanes, etc. So, in different countries, hurricanes are very common in the United States of America, and certain predictions are that, certain statistics tell that almost they coincide with around 200 hurricanes. So, they are very destructive in nature. So, the place where they travel is more important. If the hurricanes or the cyclones are existing on that of the sea surface, it is of now much damage except to that of the sailors. So, we should take precautions for sailing etc., who are moving on the sea surface, but if it moves on the land surface, they are more destructive both physically and also mechanically. So, these are some small aspects of wind movement.